Hi there guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvellous video. From hand-drawn black and white cartoons to the computer-generated ones we see today, the world of animation has evolved remarkably over the past century. While we enjoy the finesse of the booming industry, it's also important to acknowledge how it all started. In this video, we'll explore some of these classics that paved the way for the high-tech animation we have now. We've tried to proceed chronologically on this, and it's important to note that some of these cartoon shows started off as black and white before evolving into color. Also, a few of these shows were actually made much later, in times when color animation was already prevalent, but the makers still chose to go black and white, probably keeping in mind the theme of their content.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, 1927 to 1938. We're all familiar with Mickey Mouse, one of the most popular cartoon characters of all time. However, very few are aware that Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was the inspiration behind the character. This animated cartoon character was created back in 1927 for Universal Pictures by Walt Disney and Ub Iwerks, and there were as many as 27 animated shorts featuring Oswald that were released in the theaters. Mickey Mouse was created after Universal took control of the character and created a new one that had some similar features as Oswald. Oswald is iconic and memorable because it was one of the earliest cartoon characters with a unique personality. This gave fuel to the idea that cartoon characters could be defined as an individual with well-defined mannerisms and movements. The earlier black and white content was mostly a combination of physical humor and situational humor. Oswald encountered several problems and dealt with them, usually through his ability of disassembling and reshaping his body at will. The character was mischievous, adventurous, energetic, and inventive, which made the shorts a lot of fun to watch. Of course, as the name suggests, Oswald also had luck on his side. Going by how influential Oswald the Lucky Rabbit turned out to be in the world of animation, we had to start off with this as one of the most remarkable black and white animated shows. Felix the Cat, 1919 to 1930. If you're entertained by popular animated shows like Thundercats, you should know how it all started with Felix the Cat presenting the first anthropomorphic cat with its hilarious antics. Felix was a black cat with white eyes and a giant grin, and it was the first fully realized animal character in the history of American animation. Pat Sullivan, the legendary Australian cartoonist film entrepreneur, was responsible for this marvelous creation, and he was also the lead animator in many instances. He also created a comic strip, and Felix became a popular character who could be seen on toys and other merchandise, marking the successful marketing of early animation. Felix has been revived quite a few times through various animated shows and movies that were focused on the earlier black and white versions that set the wheels rolling. Felix was officially the world's first animated film star, and the fun little shorts might seem outdated today, but the impact is obvious from the widespread success enjoyed by the animated series featuring Felix in 1958. The black and white version, however, set the tone for the character, and Felix was known as a good-hearted but mischievous cat who's always willing to help others. The earlier shorts usually focus on Felix and his struggle to get food, and if you want a taste of good black and white animation, it'd be a nostalgic journey to look back at Felix in that era. Bosco the Talking Kid, 1929. This black and white animated short from 1929 had a better story than many of the modern cartoons that you see today. It was created as a means of promoting a series of Bosco cartoons, but unfortunately, the short film was never released in the theaters. In fact, a wider audience learned about this animated film much later in 2000, when it was shown during one of Cartoon Network's television specials called Toonheads: The Lost Cartoons. The story of this animated short revolves around one of the directors, Rudolph Ising, who's trying to think of new ideas for a character. He sketches a character, which ends up coming to life and reveals that his name is Bosco. The character then proceeds to show his creator all he's capable of, from singing to tap dancing to whistling. He even agrees to make the audience laugh with his antics, and the ideas of this innocent yet entertaining storyline have been reused several times in the animated content over the years. Bosco the Talking Kid was a special effort by a group of unemployed animators following the debacle of the animators hired by Charles Mintz. This was only supposed to show the distributors what they were capable of, and the director Rudolph Ising himself appeared on screen for this short. The pre-sync technique that we've all grown up watching was pioneered through this creation, and we strongly believe that such historic footage should be carefully preserved for generations to come. Mickey Mouse, early episodes, 1928 to 1935. We've already spoken about how Oswald the Lucky Rabbit paved the way for Mickey Mouse to take center stage, and this happened pretty early back in 1928. Walt Disney Productions came up with a series of animated comedy shorts, and through its early run from 1928 to 1935, Mickey Mouse revolutionized cartoons in many ways. This fun-filled character struck the perfect balance between goodness and mischief, and it's no surprise that kids over the next several decades remained addicted to this iconic cartoon character. What strikes us the most about the earlier black and white portrayals of Mickey Mouse is how the makers handled the character animation. Much like Oswald the Rabbit, Mickey had many defining characteristics, which set him apart from every other animated character of this time. The first couple of Mickey Mouse films, titled Plain Crazy and The Galloping Gaucho, failed to amuse the distributors, but with Steamboat Willie, things took a turn for the better. The makers at Disney used synchronized sound to make for a better viewing experience, and it was the start of something special, a franchise that went on to introduce several evergreen characters that are relevant even today. Betty Boop, early episodes, 1930 to 1934. We see the idea of human features being drawn to ridiculous proportions for fun being used in cartoons quite often, but Betty Boop marked one of the first such efforts. And comparably short arms and legs, coupled with childlike movements, this young lady was amusing from the get-go. Betty Boop featured in almost 90 theatrical cartoons between 1930 and 1939, and a vast majority of them were in black and white. The character became so popular that comic strips based on Betty Boop and other merchandise also found an ever-expanding market. Betty Boop started off as a supporting character, but things soon changed with the growing popularity. Stopping the show in 1932 was the first time Betty Boop was given her own series, and through the 1930s, the fuss around the animated series and the character remained in an ascending curve. The appearance changed a few times, and so did the voices for the character, but what never changed was the undying love that the audience had for Betty Boop. The character made several comebacks during the 80s, 90s, and even in recent times, but we mustn't forget the contribution of the black and white version of Betty Boop in immortalizing the character. Crazy Cat, 1916 to 1940. The Crazy Cat comic series was conceived as early as 1913, and after looking into the popularity of the comic strip, several animated shorts were made between 1916 and 1940. With as many as 231 animated shorts, it's beyond doubt that the concept was well received by the audiences. It started off with black and white silent short films, and the characters Crazy Cat and Ignatz Mouse were introduced through a number of brief skits that explored the antics and fun activities of the two. The narrative was set in the fantasy world of Coconino County, where a black cat named Crazy was smitten by a white mouse named Ignatz. The mouse threw bricks at the cat, but the latter interpreted these as messages of love. All this while, a police officer dog named Officer Pup tried to protect the cat because he had feelings for the feline. Crazy Cat changed hands from one production house to another in the course of time, with the earliest being International Film Service. The likes of Winkler Pictures, Bray Productions, Paramount Famous, and even Columbia Pictures were involved in the making of these shorts for over 2 decades. Toward the end, under Columbia Pictures, the Crazy Cat shorts had started using sound, but the advent of other popular animated films and characters ensured a waning popularity that eventually terminated the extensive run. Flip the Frog, 1930 to 1933. The creator of Flip the Frog, renowned animator Ub Iwerks, had a fallout with Walt Disney and started a cartoon studio of his own. This was the first animated series created by him, and it was released in both black and white and color versions. Flip the Frog is particularly unique for England because it was the first color and sound cartoon series for the country, and in the US, MGM produced the series in black and white. The primary protagonist, Flip the Frog, was considerably humanized and made less frog-like after the first couple of cartoons. The subsequent story arcs also ensured that Flip had a unique personality. The stories usually revolved around Flip and his dog stuck in the poverty and tragedies of the Great Depression era, but there was always something witty in their everyday conflicts. Stories ranged from Flip being out of money and trying to find his way to hunting down a notorious criminal. Within a few years, Flip the Frog had run its due course, and MGM was no longer willing to extend the series. It was soon forgotten by the masses, but true animation enthusiasts will remember the uniquely funny and touching skits brought to us by these memorable characters. Popeye the Sailor. Early episodes, 1933 to 1938. Popeye the Sailor happens to be such a popular cartoon character that we've seen numerous versions of him, mostly in color animation. However, the earlier days in animation for this iconic character were all in black and white. The popular comic strip created by E.C. Seeger was first adapted into a series of cartoon shorts in 1933 by Paramount Pictures, and the storylines thrived in their simplicity. The premise mostly centered around the villain Bluto making a move on Olive Oyl, Popeye's lady love. Popeye then proceeded to teach him a lesson after consuming spinach and gaining superhuman strength. These cartoon shorts were widely popular during the 1930s, and the urban feel in the narrative was probably the biggest selling point of these cartoons. Spinach sales spiked as much as 33%, and with a massive following from children, demands were made to tone down the violence and humor. Luckily, Seeger paid no heed to such requests and continued to portray Popeye just as he'd wanted. The earlier animated black and white shorts might have lacked the finesse, but the ideas were unique and entertaining enough to ensure a run for over 100 years for the character. Looney Tunes, early episodes, 1930 to 1943. During the early 1930s, Looney Tunes started its remarkable journey that eventually led to global fame and recognition over the years. The initial days were all about black and white animation for the show, but it didn't take away the comedic element in the narrative. Back in 1930, the cartoons were directed and produced by Hugh Harman and Rudolph Ising, and after Merry Melodies came into the picture, Hugh Harman handled the Looney Tunes department while Ising directed Merry Melodies. It was only after 1934 that the production of WB cartoons adapted to color, but Looney Tunes remained in black and white till 1942. The earlier shorts of Looney Tunes were mostly musical compositions that were owned by Warner's music publishing interests, and characters like Bosco and Buddy were usually in the mix of things. Later, the likes of Porky Pig and Daffy Duck were also featured in the shorts, which only increased the popularity of the show. Of course, a series of familiar characters were later added to the legacy of Looney Tunes, and even kids from this generation are familiar with the crazy entertainment associated with the show. Merry Melodies, early episodes 1931 to 1943. We've already spoken about the space of Merry Melodies through Looney Tunes, and from 1931 onwards, Merry Melodies started gaining prominence under Rudolph Ising. The earlier cartoons were made in black and white, and a series of cartoons from the series were pulled from circulation later in 1968 because of offensive stereotyping of African American people. The series featured many of the familiar characters from Looney Tunes, and even though it started off as black and white, Merry Melodies was quicker to adopt one-shot color films than Looney Tunes. Eventually, in 1944, Merry Melodies was sold to Warner Brothers, and it continued production until 1962. The extensive run of the show is an example of the crazy popularity enjoyed by the characters involved and the entertaining shorts. Some films under Merry Melodies, such as Speedy Gonzales and Tweety Pie, even won the Academy Award for the Best Animated Short Film category. Today, Merry Melodies may not enjoy the same popularity or familiarity as Looney Tunes, but it deserves to be mentioned in the same breath as some of the finest Western cartoons from the bygone era. Silly Symphonies, 1929 to 1939. As many as 75 musical animated shorts were produced by Walt Disney Productions between 1929 and 1939. Although Disney was already producing Mickey Mouse shorts by then, Silly Symphonies didn't have any notable continuing characters. In fact, the show was intended to be fun accompaniments to musical pieces. However, this cartoon show still has some historical significance because it introduced the iconic Donald Duck for the first time in one of its cartoons titled The Wise Little Hen back in 1934. Animation enthusiasts will also remember Silly Symphonies for its experimentation with Technicolor and the multi-plane motion picture camera. These experiments were instrumental in Disney's future plans of making feature-length animated films for the audience. The show soon shifted from two-tone Technicolor to full-color Technicolor, but it did start off as a black and white concept. The production of Silly Symphonies was eventually cancelled by Disney in 1939, but it has still go down in history as one of the most significant innovations that eventually changed the way animation was approached, a stepping stone to success for Disney in many ways. The Cats and Jamma Kids, 1916s to 1930s. This started off as a very promising comic strip created by Rudolph Dirks back in 1897, and later it went on to become the concept behind some delightful animated shorts. The story featured two brothers who rebelled against the authority. There was a plethora of dynamic and entertaining characters in the mix of things, and their adventures and caricatures formed the crux of the narrative. Between 1916 and 1918, as many as 37 silent animated shorts were created, and the popularity of the characters was sky high. Unfortunately, the effect of the First World War meant that the sentiment against German characters and associations were quite strong. The comic strip was renamed because of the German names, and it became the Shenanigan Kids, which also became fodder for a few popular cartoons in 1920. The characters and the concept became a global phenomenon, and even though the show was interrupted shortly, it remained extremely popular in the Scandinavian countries, Denmark and Norway for many years. The later animated shorts were produced in color, but the twin brothers and their antics started their journey in black and white like many others during this time. Mutt and Jeff, 1913 to 1926. Mutt and Jeff started off as a newspaper comic strip by cartoonist Bud Fisher, and it went on to become so popular that animated adaptations followed soon. It's often regarded as one of the first daily comic strips, and the journey continued for over 50 years. The journey into the animated universe began in 1911, which was largely the silent era of modern pictures. As a pre-movie feature, Mutt and Jeff were instrumental in leading to creations like Pixar shorts. The comedy shorts around Mutt and Jeff soon got picked up for proper animation in 1916. What followed were over 300 animated shorts released by the Fox Film Corporation. These black and white shorts were joyful story arcs playing around the characters, and their journey into animation continued as late as 1971, when a Mutt and Jeff feature film was released. In this movie, Mutt and Jeff, the titular protagonists, played the roles of government agents tasked with tracking down a top-secret agent who's a master of disguise. The highlight of all the content created around Mutt and Jeff is perhaps the fact that they're entirely mismatched characters. The storylines often contain subtle political messages, and the two bumbling characters could also be seen serving in World War I. The US President Dwight D. Eisenhower was openly a fan of Mutt and Jeff content, and the contemporary cartoons would do well to rub off on the simplicity and authenticity of such ideas. Coco the Clown, 1927 to 1941. Before Coco the Clown got his own animated series, the character appeared as one of the main protagonists in a major animated show from the silent era titled Out of the Inkwell. The adventures of this iconic clown and his canine companion were extremely engaging, and with time, the characters became popular enough to have story arcs entirely around them. The early shorts featuring Coco the Clown were animated by Max Fleischer, and the storyline often revolved around Coco slipping away from his creator's eyes to go on his own adventures. Between 1924 and 1927, the name was written as Coco, and later, after a brief retirement for 2 years, the character was brought back in 1931 in the animated movie called The Herring Murder Case. Following this comeback, the character featured on a regular basis in the new Fleischer Talkatoon series, and Coco started alongside other popular characters like Betty Boop and Bimbo. Although all the initial appearances were in black and white, the first color appearance came in 1949, where Coco was cast in a cameo role in the cartoon called Toys Will Be Toys. The design of Coco the Clown was as unique as the animation quality, and the black and white era will never be complete without such remarkable creations by talented artists. Scrappy, 1931 to 1939. If you like Dennis the Menace, well, you should surely get to know more about Scrappy, one of the stalwarts in the mischievous kids genre. The character was designed as the off-model version of Crazy Cat, and he had a round-shaped body with a big head and rubber hoses for limbs. He mostly displayed human-like features, and what was particularly impressive about the character was the personality given to him. Scrappy was mostly depicted as someone who was downright mischievous, and he was particularly mean to his younger brother. His antics mostly involved his younger brother, his dog Yippee, and this evil brat even had a girlfriend named Margie. One of Scrappy's most notable appearances came in the 1931 cartoon The Little Pest, where he makes life miserable for his baby brother Oopie. In this particular story arc, Scrappy is annoyed by his brother's persistence to go fishing alongside him, and finally, when the fishing lines get tangled, he proceeds to push Oopie into the water. He only helps his brother because of his fear of punishment, and manages to revive him just in time. However, he goes on to throw Oopie back in the water after he's revived, and it's assumed that Oopie is done for good this time. As you can imagine, Scrappy wasn't exactly the character people wanted their children to idolize, and there was a dark tone in his character. That being said, Scrappy merchandise still became extremely popular, as did all the animated content featuring him. Tom and Jerry, Van Buren, 1931 to 1933. Van Buren's Tom and Jerry is not the typical cat and mouse shenanigans that most people are familiar with. This Tom and Jerry were actually two unlikely characters like Mutt and Jeff, and they were paired for various adventures across various story arcs. They starred in numerous films between 1931 and 1933, and they take up a variety of roles such as plumbers, hunters, and hobos. Most of their animated adventures were centered around the theme of absurd comedies that relied heavily on music and sound effects for the extra amusement. Of course, this version of Tom and Jerry didn't gain as much prominence as Mickey Mouse or Betty Boop, but the brief run between 1931 and 1933 is remembered by the animation enthusiasts for the innovative approach. Almost all of the animated content around Van Buren's Tom and Jerry was in black and white, but that takes nothing away from the creative geniuses who worked on these projects. The shorts might look outdated by today's standards, but for the early 1930s, they were almost revolutionary in many ways. As the series progressed, the stories went on to become increasingly bizarre and bawdy, and the surreal, impossible feats depicted on screen inspired many other animated shows and characters to follow suit. Gerty the Dinosaur, 1914. Dinosaurs have long captured our fantasies, from the animated universe to the live-action CGI drama, but Gerty the Dinosaur holds a historic position in this regard. It's the earliest animated film that featured a dinosaur, and this black and white short film paved the way for the high-end brilliance we see today. This pioneering effort was the brainchild of a prolific artist, Winsor McCay, and the protagonist of this short film, Gerty, is a friendly dinosaur who does tricks for her master like a trained elephant. McCay is her master, and he calls her out of a cave to perform various tricks, such as bowing on command. The dinosaur also shows emotions, and she cries when scolded and nips back at her master when she's pushed too far. She also interacts with other prehistoric creatures during the brief stint, and finally, the master takes off stage after bowing before his audience. This is truly an enchanting piece of animation that thrills even after a century. It's a masterpiece, where the detailing is sharp and the movements are surprisingly smooth. You'll see vivid backgrounds that are unthinkable for the times, and the characters look so lifelike that even some modern animators can be put to shame. You'll enjoy the subtle humor throughout this short film, and those who are interested in the history of animation should definitely check out this animation marvel to understand how it developed from here. Farmer Alfalfa, 1920s to 1930s. Here comes another iconic cartoon character who was created in numerous cartoon shows and movies from 1915. After first appearing in Down on the Phony Farm, a series of shorts produced by Terry for Bray Studios starred him on a regular basis. However, the most popular and frequent appearances of Farmer Alfalfa came in the 1920s, when he was part of Aesop's film Fable series. The limited animation techniques of the time affected the design of the character, but in no way did it undermine its popularity. The stories would be simplistic in nature, and you'd have scenarios where the burly farmer would have to deal with a pack of hungry hounds or other similar farmland tales. The initial films and cartoon shorts created around the character were in black and white, but later color was introduced in some pieces. The journey continued well into the 1950s, after which a legal issue created some disturbances in featuring the character. Eventually, the stories around him had overstayed their welcome, and the character faded into oblivion. We almost ended up seeing Farmer Alfalfa in a cameo role in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but unfortunately, the makers couldn't obtain the rights to the character. Putty the Pup, 1935 to 1942. Dogs in the animation world are as adorable and delightful as in the real world, and the journey started way back with one of the earliest pups in cartoon history, Putty the Pup. We just spoke about Farmer Alfalfa in the video, and Putty the Pup also featured alongside him as his sidekick. The design of Putty the Pup was like any generic dog design that you see in cartoons, a white dog with a black ear. Besides the shorts with Farmer Alfalfa, the cute little pup appeared regularly in a short film series that ran from 1935 to 1942. Some of the most popular animated shorts featuring Putty the Pup include His Day Off and Pup Pup and the Gypsies. The shorts were mostly in black and white, and some of them, like Putty's Coronation, were proper 7-minute feature films that became very popular. The story arc is short and simple, where Putty dreams about being a despotic monarch after being knocked out during a fight while watching the king's coronation. Of course, nothing about the character or the numerous animated shorts screams extraordinary, but the legacy of the character still matters a lot in the rich history of cartoons. Walter Lantz Cartoons, 1929 to 1935. Walter Lantz Productions has played a significant role in the rise of animation quality and skills, and led by the prolific cartoonist and animator Walter Benjamin Lantz, the production house came up with some ideas that became immortalized. He released his first cartoon called Race Ride in 1929, which was a black and white short about a character named Oswald and his horse. Walter Lantz is most famously known for his work in Woody Woodpecker, which became a household name in the contemporary animation world. Later, in 1948, his studio even won an Academy Award nomination for the song titled The Woody Woodpecker Song. There's a long list of Walter Lantz cartoons that actually transitioned from the black and white era to the color animation scenes. He brought some of his old theatrical cartoons to network television later in 1957, but his studio now had stiff competition from the fellow animators in business, as some big names had joined the business. Nevertheless, Lantz remained relevant in the industry, and during the Vietnam War, he even entertained the troops and visited veterans in hospitals. This legend of animation passed away in 1994, but he'll always be remembered as one of the stalwarts who set up his own brand amidst fierce competition and came up with some memorable creations to take the genre forward. The Foxy Hunter, 1937. Now that we're so deep into the exploration of black and white vintage animation works, we've already covered some iconic characters like Betty Boop and Pudgy the Puppy. This animated short film was created around these popular characters, and the black and white venture by Fleischer Studios was quite a hit in the theaters. The story is as simplistic as ever, where Pudgy the Puppy and Junior manage to give Betty Boop the slip and head out for some hunting. However, their adventure misfires when the woodland creatures beat them up, and they're forced to retreat back to Betty Boop's house, who isn't seemed pleased with their disobedience. Fleischer Studios rarely disappointed when it came to promising animation work, and the Foxy Hunter is another feather in their illustrious cap. The brief sketch is dominated by Pudgy the Puppy and Junior, but Betty takes up a more domestic function, where she's a caregiver for the two. The animation quality is rather smooth for something that dates back to the late 30s, and you simply can't ignore the adorable sensual charm around Betty Boop, even in her limited appearance. This short 8-minute innocent drama with fun characters is a must-watch for every animation enthusiast out there. The Little King, 1933 to 1934. Powerful are those comic strips which use minimal words and yet manage to convey an entire story through the images. The Little King is one such comic strip created by Otto Soglo, and between 1933 and 1934, there were quite a few animated shorts created on these comics. The titular character hardly ever speaks. The Little King was of a short stature, as his name suggests, and his mannerisms were childlike and cheerful. The stories usually featured him pursuing his hobbies, and the fun-loving king would often play children's games and flirt with pretty women. Most of the black and white cartoon shorts on The Little King were produced by Van Buren Studios, and except for one small instance in the film titled Marching Along, the king never speaks in the cartoons, just like his comic book version. The animation quality might not be mind-blowing, but the short and sweet storylines never fail to amuse the viewers. Through these 3 years, there were more than 10 such animated shorts, and later, in 1936, The Little King even featured alongside Betty Boop for a film. If you wish to enjoy the taste of a well-adapted comic book animation, you might check out the brilliant shorts on The Little King. Color Classics, early episodes, 1934 to 1936. Although the title suggests Color Classics, this cartoon series comprising of several animated short films started off with quite a few black and white shorts. Produced by the Powerhouse during the 30s, Fleischer Studios, in association with Paramount Pictures, produced as many as 36 shorts in this series. The first short of Color Classics was done with the two-strip Cinecolor process, but slowly the makers adapted the use of Technicolor, and one of the earlier shorts called Poor Cinderella featured the iconic Betty Boop. Other familiar faces that you can see in Color Classics include Grampy, Tommy Cod, and even Hunky and Spunky. A wonderful mix of color and black and white shorts. A fine synthesis of old and new animation styles from that era, Color Classics holds an important place in the history of cartoons. If you want to check out some of the finest in the series, go for the following shorts: The Fresh Vegetable Mystery, Poor Cinderella, Little Dutch Mill, The Song of the Birds, and a few others. Happy Harmonies, early episodes, 1934 to 1936. Happy Harmonies is another series of animated cartoon shorts that belonged to an era which started off with black and white and slowly adapted to color animation. Thus, the earlier shorts from the series are in black and white, and the later ones can be found in color. Directed by renowned animation legends like Rudolph Ising and William Hanna, the show featured shorts under 10 minutes, and almost all of them are well worth your time. The first short film under Happy Harmonies was titled The Discontented Canary, which is also the first cartoon produced for MGM. The series was incredibly successful, and 2 of the entries were even nominated for the Oscars. However, the producers faced a constant problem, where the budget was constantly overstepped during production. Eventually, MGM terminated the series in early 1938, even though singular shorts featuring characters from Happy Harmonies continued to be made till the late 60s. Today, MGM is known for some of the greatest works in animation, and it might be a fun throwback to check out their earlier work. Comicolor Cartoons, early episodes, 1933 to 1935. Comicolor Cartoons is another fine animated series from the mid-30s, which started off in black and white and went on to color production after the initial few shorts. There were 25 animated shorts in this series, and most of them were based on popular fairy tales. Any kid familiar with myths and legends or commonly known fairy tales could relate to these shorts, and even the adults were entertained by these well-made efforts. The initial production was in the hands of UB Iwerks, and the entire series was exclusively shot in Cinecolor. The first short in this series was titled Jack and the Beanstalk, and other notable entries include Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp, The Brave Tin Soldier, The Headless Horseman, Mary's Little Lamb, Sinbad the Sailor, and many others. Many of these shorts are still available for you to watch. It might be a fun way to rewind as you look back at these old-fashioned fairy tale portrayals. The transition from black and white to color is also something to watch out for, and Comicolor cartoons will always hold a special place in the history of vintage cartoon shows. Carnival Kid, 1929. This is one of the most well-known Mickey Mouse short films from the black and white era. The Carnival Kid was animated by UB Iwerks and directed by Walt Disney, a classic combination that led to many renowned hits. The story is delivered in 2 parts. The first bit, where Mickey can be seen selling hot dogs at a carnival, and the second bit, where Mickey is accompanied by 2 cats in a moonlit adventure. Of course, not everything shown in this short is bound to make sense or be logic-driven. A cow being carried by balloons or screaming hot dogs contribute to a bizarre plot that promises to offer a few laughs for the viewers. The black and white animation is quite smooth and pleasant to watch, and the sketches are all on point. While you might laugh off the weird bits of this cartoon production, you can't deny the historical significance significance of the Carnival Kid, where the world heard Mickey speak for the very first time. It was later used as the basis for Mickey's popular catchphrase, "Hot dog!" But the later cartoon versions usually use a deeper voice for the character. Swing Symphony, early episodes, 1941 to 1945. We've already spoken about the legacy of Walter Lantz Productions in this video, and Swing Symphony is another example of its fine work. The audience had already experienced Walt Disney's Silly Symphony, and this was supposed to be a more contemporary take on the Walt Disney version. Although the earlier episodes were originally created in black and white, they were later redone in color, which are still available for you to watch today. Swing Symphony was notable for using a few exclusive characters who appeared in the series. There were also occasional features from popular cartoon characters like Woody Woodpecker and Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. While the animated shorts became extremely popular, there were also a few complaints regarding a few of them being too offensive or stereotyping certain things, even though the makers claimed that it wasn't intentionally done. Finally, the journey for the series came to an abrupt end in 1945 because by this time swing music, which was the basis for most of the shorts, was fading in popularity. The bright, vibrant animation of Walter Lantz Productions for the Swing Symphony cartoon is definitely worth checking out. Barney Bear, early episodes, 1939 to 1943. This is another piece of vintage cartoon shows from MGM Studios, and the titular character is an anthropomorphic animated bear. Barney seeks peace and quiet more than anything, and most of the story arcs are centered around the character's quest for the same. There were around 26 cartoons made between 1939 and 1954, and the first few came in black and white, even though some of them were later redone in color. Created by the talented Rudolph Ising, here was a character that had both the comic elements and a distinct personality. The protagonist showed some identifiable mannerisms, which the viewers could relate to. The animated films were not only popular among the masses, but were also critically acclaimed in many cases. The 1941 short, titled The Rookie Bear, even won an Oscar nomination, but the show kept changing hands through its brief runtime. Although the makers pulled the plug on Barney Bear back in the 40s, it was brought back in Filmation's Tom and Jerry comedy show in 1980, and even used in more recent cameo appearances in 2010 and 2016 for the titles Tom and Jerry Meet Sherlock Holmes and Tom and Jerry Back to Oz, respectively. Andy Panda, early episodes, 1939 to 1943. Andy Panda is yet another anthropomorphic cartoon like Barney Bear, and this one was from the creative minds of Walter Lantz. He'd already tasted success with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and Andy became his new animated star. Lantz was inspired by a trip to the zoo, where a young panda had drawn his attention, and Andy Panda was based on this baby panda. Besides Andy, the story also featured some of his fellow companions like the feisty turtle named Mr. Whippletree and his immediate family. One of the very first Andy Panda movies was called Life Begins for Andy Panda, and it was made using Technicolor. Although the short film was only 8 minutes long, it still told a thrilling tale of Andy Panda being born in the forest and then growing up to face the pygmy hunters along with several fellow animal friends and family. Both the black and white and color versions of Andy Panda are equally appealing, and the character was only withdrawn after another popular cartoon character, Woody Woodpecker, took off. Now that movies like Kung Fu Panda are such super hits, it might be a good idea to look back at where it all started for pandas in animation. The Flintstones, first 2 seasons, 1960 to 1962. Even though animation in color was prevalent during the times, the showrunners decided to go black and white for the first 2 seasons of The Flintstones. This was mainly done to be in line with the overall theme of the show, and many fans would agree that the black and white episodes were somewhat superior than the later color versions. The story is set in a comical Stone Age scenario, where 2 Stone Age families are stuck in modern times. The misadventures and confusion of the 2 families, the Flintstones and the Rubbles, form the crux of the narrative. The best thing about the show was the fun characters who made things entertaining. Their mannerisms, expressions, and personalities made them extremely relatable and recognizable for the viewers. The writing of the show appealed to children and adults alike, and there was often a little moral learning on the side. This classic Hanna-Barbera show was incredibly funny and smart, and the humor was in line with the fact that it was written for the primetime slot. You'd find this evergreen animated series relatable even today, which makes it one of the best animated sitcoms of all time. The Captain and the Kids, 1938 to 1939. It started off as a popular comic strip, which was then adapted by MGM Studios. The Captain and the Kids went on to become MGM's first self-produced series. There were 15 cartoons in this series before it was finally cancelled. The first title in the series was Blue Monday, which explored a rather bizarre plot featuring the Captain. The short film looks into the chaos and confusion that he faces after being attacked by the washing machine and the vacuum cleaner. The entire short is about the plight of the Captain, and it remains a common theme for many others in the series. Other notable titles for the Captain and the Kids include The Pygmy Hunt, Buried Treasure, The Winning Ticket, and many others. The series maintained the same voice actors for the characters, which made them familiar and catchy among the viewers. The competition was becoming stuffed during the late 30s, and some of the key members left the team, which ultimately led to a premature cancellation. However, the simplistic shorts are certainly worth revisiting for the omnipresent fun element. Little Lulu, early episodes, 1943 to 1948. Little Lulu was a popular comic strip from the 1930s, and it grabbed some attention in the next decade when animators decided to adapt it for shorts. The protagonist, Little Lulu, is a smart and stubborn little girl who usually wears a dress and a hat. The stories from the comics usually focus around Lulu trying to prove to the boys that the girls are just as good as them. However, the animated adaptations brought some variety in the mix. The first few shorts in the series were created in black and white, and the very first one was titled Eggs Don't Bounce. The story is about little Lulu who ends up breaking the eggs that she bought. Dreading the punishment she'd face for the accident, she has a clever plan of replacing the eggs with that of a feisty hen, Henrietta. Other notable titles such as I'm Just Curious, Lucky Lulu, and Lulu at the Zoo were also quite popular among the viewers. By 1948, the series had run its course. Finally, Paramount refused to renew the license for Little Lulu, and a new character named Little Audrey replaced her. Superman, early episodes, 1941, 1942. From comic books to animation to live action, the journey of Superman across various media has been impressive, to say the least. This 1940s animated version, however, is the first animated appearance of this superhero. They're also known as the Fleischer Superman cartoons, and as many as 17 short films were made during this time using Technicolor by Paramount Pictures. The earlier shorts were made in black and white, and it was fascinating for the viewers back in the day to witness their favorite superhero on screen. The very first cartoon in the series, called Superman, got an Academy Award nomination, and in due course of time, the Fleischer cartoons enabled Superman with one of his greatest powers, the ability to fly around. Back then, the comic book versions only showed him leaping from one place to another, but the animated shorts revolutionized the concept. Toward the later part of the series, the cartoons also dealt in short World War II propaganda stories, and Superman can even be seen participating in the war against the fascist forces. The Superman saga would have continued longer had it not been for the insane making charges, which eventually made the studio cancel the project. However, these animated shorts from the early 40s are worth revisiting for every Superman fan out there, simply for the legacy associated with the series. Mighty Mouse, early episodes, 1942 to 1955. Mighty Mouse is a familiar name, largely for the controversy surrounding the character during the 80s, when a particular scene was interpreted as a character snorting drugs in a show meant for kids. However, the journey of Mighty Mouse started much earlier during the 1940s. Like many other cartoons of the time, Mighty Mouse began with a few black and white episodes before turning to color, and even a few of those black and white episodes were later remade. This anthropomorphic superhero mouse was first featured in the 1942 short The Mouse of Tomorrow, and it got its name in the film The Wreck of the Hesperus. The earlier designs of Mighty Mouse, who was then known as Super Mouse, resembled Superman in many ways. The stories were about its heroics in saving other mice from the mean cats and other threats. In the later shorts, it even took down enemies like evil spirits, vultures, bat cats, and other powerful opponents. There's around 80 theatrical shorts that feature Mighty Mouse, and back in the 40s and 50s, it was no less iconic than Mickey Mouse. If the earlier adaptations don't amuse you, Filmation's take on the Mighty Mouse during the 60s surely will. Terry Toons, early episodes, 1930s. There were quite a few influential and promising animation studios during the early days of animation, and Terry Toons is one of them, founded by Paul Terry, Frank Moser, and a few others. We just discussed Mighty Mouse in the video, which happened to be a Terry Toons production, but there were some other popular characters that they came up with, the likes of Fanny Zilch, Gandy Goose, Dinky Duck, etc., were the brainchild of Terry Toons and entertained the audience during these times. The earlier short films and episodes from Terry Toons were in black and white, but they adapted to color with time. Terry Toons gained in popularity courtesy of the educational picture shorts created by Fox Film Company to promote them. Paul Terry had previously worked with characters like Farmer Alfalfa, and a spin-off of the character was created for Terry Toons called Kiko the Kangaroo. The studio changed hands and was sold to CBS when Paul Terry retired, but the journey of Terry Toons continued for much longer till the 1970s. There were quite a few Terry Toons comic books as well, created around the characters that became popular through the animated shorts. Overall, they had a major role to play through the 4 decades of their existence and produced some evergreen cartoon shows that are cherished even today. The Adventures of Superman, 1952 to 1954. The first 2 seasons of Adventures of Superman were filmed in black and white, and there were 52 such episodes that aired between 1952 and 1954. The modern-day colorized version of Superman in animation is probably deep-rooted from these early days, which also explored a lot with the powers of Superman and his heroics. The show took up a light-hearted tone from the 3rd season, and with the growing popularity of color television sets, the demand for color animation also grew. However, the brilliance of the first 2 seasons could hardly be matched progressed in what followed. The first episode, titled Superman on Earth, dove into the origin story of the superhero, where an infant Superman is sent to Earth in a rocket. He's then adopted by Sarah and Eben Kent, and he grows up as Clark Kent without being aware of his true powers. But after moving to Metropolis, he started using his powers to fight evil and emerged as the savior, Superman. The later episodes show him more as an investigator than a superhero, and he usually has to deal with corrupt humans more than superpowered villains. The animation quality was smooth and crisp, and these black and white episodes are good enough to make you forget the absence of color. Clutch Cargo, 1959. This animated series is known for its imaginative stories and the use of the SynchroVox technology, which is basically a method that combines static images with moving images. The titular Clutch Cargo is an adventurer, and he keeps heading out on dangerous missions accompanied by his young ward, Spinner, and their pet dog, Paddlefoot. The short episodes were effective and engaged the viewers till the very end. The story had a nice ring of truth to it, and the show managed to strive despite some serious budgetary constraints. It was a clever move to mask the lack of animation finesse with objects blocking the movements, such as a bush covering walking legs. However, the real reason behind the odd-looking animation is a touching story. The child of the creator of the show was deaf, and she couldn't understand regular cartoons because it wasn't possible to lip-read the mouth movements. Thus, he came up with the idea of using real mouths, and even deaf children could enjoy the show. Back in the days of black and white entertainment on TV, this animated series was quality entertainment, and today you can even check out the colorized version of this cartoon. The Adventures of Powwow, 1949. The Captain Kangaroo show was extremely popular during the late 40s and early 50s, and this is where Adventures of Powwow was broadcast for the first time. The series focuses on the pre-adolescent life and adventures of a Native American boy named Powwow. There are other important characters as well, such as his friends and the medicine man of their tribe. The episodes usually explore Powwow's efforts to protect the forest and animals from various threats, and the wise medicine man is always there with a word of advice for him. There were a total of 45 episodes in this series, and it continued till 1957 when the idea was dropped and the show got cancelled. The production qualities and technicalities kept getting better with time, and the original black and white episodes had their own charm. The narrative is devoid of any dialogues or voice acting, and there's only a narrator who uses the monologue to explain the events of the episode. The storytelling is action-based and fun, which makes it enjoyable for both kids and adults. Those who are familiar with the Adventures of Powwow will have fond memories of the show, and you might want to check out some of the episodes to enjoy the simple charms of vintage animation. The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends. Early episodes, 1959 to 1961. This variety show is also known as the Bullwinkle Show, and the earlier episodes of the series were made in black and white. The main characters are Rocky, who happens to be a spirited flying squirrel, and Bullwinkle is a lovable moose. Their adventures make up for the episodes, and the simplistic storytelling never fails to amuse their fans. There were various segments in the series, including the Adventures of Dudley Do-Right, Aesop and Son, Fractured Fairy Tales, and a few others. Watching this series today will be like stepping inside a time machine, because everything about the show is backdated and vintage. It stands as proof of the fact that one doesn't have to delve into the depths of scatology and profanity in order to be funny. The writing for the show will appeal to the adults as well, and the voice work also deserves some credit for being flawless. The characters are engaging, and all of the segments were well sketched out to make this series the classic parody and entertainer that it is. Even after 6 decades, this is a show that'll be worth revisiting in order to heal your weekday blues. Colonel Bleep, 1957 to 1960. The story of Colonel Bleep is futuristic for its times, and it revolved around a space agent from the planet Futura named Colonel Bleep. After a deadly nuclear explosion on Earth, he's out to explore the effects and investigate. The character was fun to watch on screen, with his transparent bubble helmet that had a helicopter-like propeller and 2 antennae. The episodes had a variety of formats and various kinds of plots, which never made the narrative monotonous. Even though the earlier run of the show was only for a few years, it continued to be aired as late as 1971. There were around 100 episodes of Colonel Bleep, but many have been lost in the course of time. Although Colonel Bleep was the first color cartoon series on TV, there were some black and white episodes which were lost for a long time. Recently, they've been restored, and you can check out these black and white earlier episodes of the show as well. Space Angel, 1962 to 1964. We've already spoken about the SynchroVox technique used for the show Clutch Cargo, and Space Angel used a similar style. This animated series, created by Dick Darley, explored the bizarre adventures of 3 astronauts. These men worked for the Earth Bureau of Investigation and the Interplanetary Space Force Department, and there were several episodes that featured super cool space combat involving the protagonists. They had a wide array of deadly space villains to deal with, and the Athenians were one of their constant nemesis. The looks of the series make it clear that it was made on a low low budget. The animation style is rather crude, even after the show transitioned into color episodes from black and white. Motion is kept to a bare minimum because of such limitations, but the imaginative nature of the series knew no bounds. It was made during the times when space programs and anything about the subject triggered curiosity, and the episodes did their best to cash out these sentiments. The narrative also had a weird sense of humor, and if you're in a retro mood, Space Angel might be a fun cartoon to enjoy. Crusader Rabbit, 1949 to 1951. The historical value of Crusader Rabbit is paramount because it's the oldest animated series that was made for television. The main characters in the series included the titular Crusader Rabbit and his sidekick, Rags, and the 4-minute-long satirical episodes were entertainment-packed cliffhangers. There were 455 episodes across 3 seasons, and the first 195 of these episodes were made in black and white. This was Jay Ward's first major animation series, and this is the same man who later went on to create the Bullwinkle Show. The show set high standards with its unique storylines and format. The narrative was adorable and funny, something that parents could enjoy along with their children, and the voice actors did a fine job for all the major characters. Each segment had the perfect combination of humor, satire, and action that made for a delightful watch. The success of this cartoon series also meant that many similar character-based shows would emerge in the future, and Crusader Rabbit was genre-defining stuff in this regard. Samurai Jack, selected episodes in black and white. Samurai Jack is probably the most popular and familiar title on this list, especially for our young audience. But even this legendary animated series had some key episodes made in black and white. The story of Samurai Jack takes the viewers into a fantasy world where a brave young samurai named Jack is thrown into a dystopian future by the evil wizard Aku. Jack must find a way to fight against a superior opponent while also trying to figure out a way to reach back to his own times. The dark and gritty atmosphere of this animated series, coupled with the vibrant animation and engaging storytelling, made for a killer combo. Samurai Jack became incredibly popular, and this cinematic cartoon thrives under some intelligent and superb writing. The production levels are unparalleled even after 2 decades, and it was truly a godsend for American animation in the 21st century. Besides the entirely black and white episodes in between, the solid black and white colors are used abundantly in order to keep up with the dark theme of the story. This is a must-watch for every action animation lover out there, because such shows are a once-in-a-generation phenomenon. Sinbad Jr. and His Magic Belt, 1965 to 1966. Hanna-Barbera cartoons have achieved legendary status in today's time, but this show marks one of their earlier works. As you can imagine from the title, Sinbad Jr. is the son of the famous sailor Sinbad, and he seeks out adventures just like his father. He sets out on his sailboat and deals with villains and various other threats during his journey. His magic belt allowed him to possess the power of 50 men when he required, and accompanied by Salty the parrot, his exploits make up for the thrilling episodes. Many of the initial episodes of this show were telecast in black and white, and even with shaky, primitive animation, the exciting stories managed to entertain the viewers. It was a memorable show for those who were lucky enough to watch it as a kid. Talented voice actors like Mel Blanc didn't let their skills go to waste, and every character is brought to life through their brilliance. It's truly a tragedy that many of the original episodes have been lost, and today, only a few specimens of this remarkable series remain in circulation. QT Hush, 1960 to 1961. QT Hush is a unique private investigator who operates alongside his shadow that has a mind of its own and works independently. He also has a trusted assistant and his pet dog, and their exploits make up the entertaining episodes in the show. There are about 103.5-minute episodes, many of which are in black and white. The episodes were meant to be amusing for the viewers, but some of them turned out to be fairly creepy for the young ones. The protagonist was frequently called by the cops to solve tricky cases, and the way he went about these cases actually brought about the laughs. Of course, the audience back then wasn't so picky about their shows, and the narrative could always hide its limitations. That being said, the rough animation or the bizarre plot points did precious little to dull the charms of QT Hush and his crime-solving adventures. Calvin and the Colonel, 1961 to 1962. There's nothing more amusing than the misadventures of an unlikely duo, and Calvin and the Colonel presents the antics of the titular characters. Colonel Montgomery is a cool fox and Calvin is a dim-witted bear, and the shenanigans will leave you in splits. The show also features another mischievous character named Oliver, who happens to be a lawyer, and a large-scale comedy of errors unfolds in every episode. The show was originally broadcast in black and white, but the color productions can also be viewed now. This is a forgotten classic that manages to hold up well even in today's times. It's among the earliest animated TV shows made for adults, and much of the humor in the narrative is not meant for kids. The episodes usually involve the Colonel coming up with some zany ideas and the comical consequences for the same. The voice work was nicely done, and the accents of the characters made them funnier. The animation quality isn't much to speak about, but it's largely due to the low budget of the show. Enjoy this old classic without any preconceived bias, and you're surely gonna have a wonderful time. The Alvin Show, early episodes, 1961 to 1962. The Chipmunk song had become a raging hit back in the day, and it sparked the ideas of an animated series about singing rodents. The Alvin Show stars 3 young chipmunks named Alvin, Theodore, and Simon, and they're cared for by the manager, David Seville. The youngsters keep getting into trouble, and the episodes usually explore their mischievous deeds and the hilarious situations that they get into. 2 things that stand out for those who have watched the show are the opening sequence and the catchy theme tune. The writing was pretty strong for this series, and it was also backed by some top-notch performances from the voice actors. It'll keep you interested and make you laugh, 2 of the most crucial things one looks for in cartoon shows. It's funny to think that it all started with a novelty Christmas record called The Chipmunk Song becoming too popular, but the animated series lived up to the expectations of the makers. Sadly, a few segments of the series have been lost, but you should check out the available ones for some good old-fashioned cartoon. Roger Ramjet, 1965. Roger Ramjet is your typical superhero, extremely patriotic and highly moral. He's powered by his proton energy pills that give him insane superpowers for 20 seconds, and he uses these powers to save the world time and time again. He's up against some recurring villains and some new additions who make life difficult for him, but he and his psychics always find a way to defeat them all. Many of the original episodes were telecast in black and white, but the Cartoon Network rerun of the show during the 90s portrays everything in color. The animation quality of the show is pretty amazing for the times, and there were multiple pop culture references that made things fun for viewers across all age groups. There's a generous dose of humor, and everything from the unique characters, the voices behind them, and solid dialogue come together to put up a solid entertainer. Gigantor, early episodes, 1964. This is a unique anime adaptation that aired in the US in the mid-1960s. The story's set in a distant future, and the protagonist is a 12-year-old boy named Jimmy Sparks, who controls a huge flying robot named Gigantor. This robot was designed by Jimmy's father, and it was programmed to act as a peacekeeper. The animated series peeks into Jimmy's family life and his adventures, where he fights crime with the help of his super robot. The black and white episodes in this series are few, but the earlier telecast was often observed in black and white during its initial release in the US. The show impressed the American audience with some high-quality animation work, and you can check out the original Japanese version without the dubbing for best results. Before mecha anime became insanely popular in the US, shows like Gigantor led the groundwork. Don't miss out on this one if you want to experience an excellent classic cartoon from the vintage era. Astro Boy, early episodes, 1963 to 1966. This black and white TV series was actually a Japanese series based on a popular manga. It was widely watched in Japan, and it was no different in the US. The story is set in the year 2013, and in this futuristic world, a scientist creates an advanced robotic system following the death of his son. The theme explores a society where robots are treated as slaves, and the narrative puts out the question of whether or not the life of a robot should be free. When trouble starts brewing across the universe, it's up to a special robot named Astro Boy to save the day with his mentor. The art style of Astro Boy is so beautiful that you wouldn't be able to take your eyes off the screen. The stories give out a timeless message, and most of the plots remain sincere to the source material manga. Of course, many strong elements of the show are lost in translation, but it was still a memorable experience for the American audience. This sophisticated animated series is not just for kids, and the mature minds will find some food for their soul. Astro Boy might be a fun throwback to an older style of anime in the US. Speed Racer, early episodes, 1967 to 1968. Only the early episodes of Speed Racer were created in black and white, but the entire series is a thrilling joyride for the fans. It tells the story of a spirited teenager whose ambition is to become the best racer car champion in the world. He's backed by his family and friends in his journey, but the biggest support to his aspirations is his father's high-tech race car called the Mach 5. Can he accomplish his dreams and make it big in the racing world? The car lovers will be in for a treat, as this animated series is a wonderful mix of action, adventure, and some adrenaline-pumping car races. There's a few dark moments in the show as well, but the story is suitable for children of all ages. You get to see the protagonist's family dynamics and his struggles, and there's always some funny moments to stop things from becoming too serious. If you weren't fortunate enough to watch this as a child, you should explore the series now in order to understand how the anime revolution started to take shape in the US. We have to admit that many of these cartoon shows will no longer seem relevant or entertaining if you compare it with the modern-day content. However, many animated shows from the list are actually the pioneers who made it all possible. Do let us know in the comments below about your thoughts on black and white cartoons, and also tell us if you've watched any of the shows from our list.